So what I'm going to cover between now and lunch is I'm going to look at the big pricing mistakes that firms make. And as Steve said this morning, the one thing that's holding us back as firms and stopping us being excellent is a lack of time. And the number one thing that's stopping us is we don't know how to price. We're not charging enough, we're not making enough money, and if we don't make enough money, we can't afford to build in the resources, and we can't afford to take the time to build the systems that we need to become truly excellent. So my name is Mark Wickersham. Just a bit about me for those of you that don't know me. I started my own, I've been in the profession since 1988. I set up my own practice back in 1996. That's a very old picture of back in about 99 when we got invested in people. So I ran my own practice in 1996, made pretty much every mistake you can think of. I went into that practice thinking I knew everything. The reality was I found I knew so little, and every year that was passed I realised how little I really know and how much more I need to learn. Last year I wrote Effective Pricing for Accountants. Some of you may have read that. It was published in May of 2010, and in May of 2010 it reached the #1 spot on Amazon as the #1 business books, beating people like Alan Sugar for a few days. So my real passion is helping firms with their pricing, because I know that most firms and accountants haven't got a clue how to price. I certainly didn't, and made a huge number of mistakes in the early years of my practice. If you want to find out more about me, why don't you check out my LinkedIn profile. If you're not connected with me, connect up with me, and what I'll do is I'll send you some links to some free stuff. So if you're not connected on LinkedIn, make a note to connect with me when you get back, and I'll send you that stuff. So pricing, one of the things that when I've talked to accountants, I've worked with accountants now since 1999, so 13 years working with accountants. And a lot of accountants say to me, well, pricing's easy, isn't it? It's all about costs, isn't it? Well, actually, no. Pricing has got absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with cost. Forget all our stuff with numbers that we've learned. That stuff doesn't help us with pricing. Pricing has everything to do with behavioural economics. Steve talked about this morning. It's about communication skills. It's about dealing with people. That's the stuff that we need to understand if we want to be truly effective with pricing. So I'm going to go through what I think are the 7 biggest mistakes that we make as accountants, certainly things that I made as mistakes in the early years of running my practice. The first one of those, and this is the biggest problem, that's stopping us pricing successfully. And it's very simple. It's a lack of confidence. And again, I think Steve mentioned it this morning. We've got to be confident about our pricing. We mustn't shy away and be embarrassed if we've got higher prices than the firms down the road. We must be confident because we've gone through huge amounts of training, experience. We've got huge amounts of knowledge, and sometimes we take that for granted or don't realise how much value we can really add to our clients. What a difference we can make to our clients, and we need to recognise that we can make huge differences and have confidence in what we can do and confidence in our prices. And I think the key things with confidence is partly a mindset change. We need to recognise that we add massive value. And I think part of the problem is as accountants, we hate, because we have that lack of confidence, there's kind of a downward spiral. We hate, for example, when clients say to us, that's a bit expensive, or I'm not sure, I might go to the firm down the road because they're a bit cheaper. We hate those sort of reactions, and so we keep our prices low because it's easier for us. It's an easier life to not have those sort of reactions from clients and prospects. But the reality is, you want those sorts of feedback. You want people to say, that's a bit expensive. You should encourage that and look for that, because if you never get that reaction, it means you're too cheap. I think the other thing that affects confidence as well is a lack of knowledge. We've never been trained as accountants to price, because pricing has nothing to do with costs. It's about behavioural economics. It's about communication skills. It's about dealing with people. So we need to learn those skills. Only when we learn those skills can we be truly confident and go out in the marketplace and get the prices we truly deserve. So that's the first big problem we have. It's a lack of confidence. We need to get over that barrier. The second thing is learning from the past, and that's a mistake, by the way, not a tip. We make the mistake of learning from the past. If I go back to when I was in practice, I joined the profession back in 1988, came out of university, became a chartered accountant, and I worked for the largest independent firm in Sheffield. And when I worked there, we filled in the timesheets, and when we did the bills, we'd print off the time records, we'd look at that, we'd multiply it by, charge hours by charge rates, and so on. That's what we did. I grew up thinking that that was the way you've got to do things in the accounting profession. In fact, the firm I worked for, just before I set up my practice, I went to work for a multi-partner firm in Sheffield as a corporation tax manager. What they did, as well as the timesheets, if you wanted to make a phone call to a client, you were never ever allowed to ring them direct. You had to go through the reception because they had a system where every telephone call was logged as a cost and put on the timesheets, on the work in progress prints. Whenever you wanted to photocopy something, you had to go to the photocopy machine, look up a client code, put that into the photocopier, because it would then, when you print out the work in progress things, as well as the time cost, telephone calls, costs of photocopies, absolutely ridiculous. But as accountants, because we're focused on costs, we sometimes do these stupid things. So when I started my practice back in 1996, I thought you had to keep timesheets. I thought you had to price based on hours. That was learning from the past. What I've learned since is that's just rubbish. We don't need to keep timesheets. We certainly don't need to keep timesheets for billing purposes. It's got no place in the profession. And what I would suggest is that rather than learning from other accountants and things we've done in the past, let's look at who are the best people out there, not even necessarily in the profession, but outside the profession. Who are the best people when it comes to pricing? And let's learn about what they do, because the chances are other businesses that charge very, very well, like Starbucks, for example, we can probably learn so much more from how Starbucks price than by looking at other firms of accountants. So let's learn from other people and not learn from what we've done in the past. Forget the past. And the third mistake, big misconception that I've from talking to accountants over the years, I've noticed that a lot of firms are starting to now do fixed pricing, which is, it's a good thing. It's a great thing to give fixed pricing, and in a session I'll do this stuff and I'll talk about why it's such a great thing to give clients fixed prices, rather than the old way. When I was in practice, when I was training, when I set my own practice up, it would be based on the timesheets. I wouldn't be able to give a price up front because I used to say to the client, well, it depends how long it'll take. Process that I call ambush billing. It's something we should not do. But I think the big misconception is fixed pricing is not the solution. There's been an increasing acceptance over the last 13 years while I've been working with accountants that we must get away from time-based billing and stop this ambush surprise billing. And a lot of firms are now starting to give fixed prices, but fixed prices in itself isn't necessarily the solution. What we need to be doing with pricing is make sure that we're value pricing. Our prices should be linked to the value. And fixed pricing is not necessarily value pricing. Just because you've given the client a fixed price up front doesn't mean that price is done by reference to value. So, for example, I know that with company formations, for example, I know that from research I've done over the last 10 years, is that the average firm of accountants, that the average price that firms charge for helping a client set up a limited company is around about £400. And some firms now give a fixed price and say it will cost you £400 to form a limited company. But if that price, that fixed price, is created because that's based on kind of what you've done in the past, and if what you've done in the past is based on time, then it's still based more on time than what value is. There are other firms. If you talk to the two firms on the stage, there's a guy called David Delve in the AVN room. He shared a success story with a room full of people a couple of months ago. You can find his video, this sort of story, on the AVN YouTube channel. He explained how he did a company formation, formed a limited company for a client. He's been an AVN member for 7 or 8 months now. He's been using the processes and the techniques and the systems that I've been teaching him. He did a company formation and he earned a fee of £128,000. He went on to explain, he then said, I know that was a bit of a one-off. I've done quite a few other ones and they've only been £10,000 or £15,000. Most firms of accountants charge about £400. He's doing exactly the same thing as everybody else, but he's found a better way to price because he's found a way to communicate better with clients and calculate the price based on the value. The bigger the value, if you add masses of value to your clients, then you deserve to be richly rewarded. Price has got nothing to do with costs, the amount of time that you take on a job. Nothing to do with that. It's about the value that you give to your clients. So fixed price is not the solution. We need to understand and we need to learn the skills of value pricing. And that's got nothing to do with costs. It's about behavioural economics. It's about psychology. It's people, communication skills. So the next big mistake that firms make in their pricing is they're not giving enough value. So we need to make sure that we are adding, if we want to earn bigger fees and if we're starting to price based on value, we need to make sure that value is much, much bigger. We need to focus on value. But what is value? Well, a great phrase from Ron Baker. Ron Baker says that value is in the hearts and minds of customers. What he says is that every single one of us values things in a different way. So if we take any product you can think of, take a 3 Series BMW. If I was to ask you all to write down now, what value would you place on that? What value to you would you have with a 3 Series BMW? You would all write down a completely different figure. Because we all value things differently. And so if we're going to be properly value pricing, we need to recognise that we can't just have a price list with set standard prices, because we need to recognise that different clients are going to pay different prices. We need to have a conversation. We need to talk to our clients, and we need to find out what is it they value in the first place. Because there's no point creating a bigger bundle of stuff, chucking more things into your service, if all those things you're adding in, the clients don't want. We need to find out what it is that they value, and every client is different. So one of the systems I would suggest you do, and it's an incredibly simple system that I know a number of firms I work with do, is whenever you take on a brand new client, why don't you ask them what's important to them? Why don't you have a simple 1 or 2 page sheet of paper, little checklist, and go through a number of things. So for example, you could ask the client, how important is it to you that you deal with the partner? And you could be on a scale of 1 to 5 or whatever. How important is it to you that your accounts are turned around within 30 days? And you could probably come up with a dozen various criteria of things that may or may not be important to clients. Find out what's important to them. And when you know that, when you know what they value, I mean, take for example, turnaround times. Some clients highly value getting their stuff back within 2 or 3 weeks. They'd love to get their accounts back really, really quickly because they can impress the bank, it can help them get finance, funding, whatever. So for some clients, it's critically important that you turn their stuff around really, really quickly. For other clients, they don't care. You can have their stuff for 6 months. But you need to know that every client will feel differently about that. When you understand what they value, what's important to them, you can start to structure your pricing around that. And Steve talked about a great process this morning where the defaults. What's your default? So the default position, the service could be that you offer 30-day turnaround guarantees, every meeting's with the partner. But if they don't value those things, perhaps they could take those things out and choose the price that they want based on the combination of benefits that they want. So you need to be asking your clients, what is it that's important to them? What do they value? When we're also looking at value, you need to bear in mind that value really is made up of 2 elements. There's the tangible stuff and the intangible stuff. What do I mean by that? The tangible stuff is the stuff that you do, the service, the product, the stuff that you give them. So when you're thinking about adding more value and creating a bigger bundle of stuff, you can think about, on the one side, all the stuff that you do. How can you make it more valuable by giving more stuff? So for example, it might be as part of your year-end accounts, you always benchmark them. Always do a benchmarking report. That could increase the bundle of benefits, make your accounts package much more value if you include a benchmarking report and go through the findings. But it's not just the tangible stuff. Never ever dismiss the intangible stuff at all. The intangible stuff can sometimes be even more important. That's the way that you deliver things. That's the service experience. And that's things like, for example, how quickly you turn the accounts round. Things like that, the experience they get can be incredibly valuable. Even little things like, for example, being able to park at having a parking space reserved for them. Some people hate going to their accountants, perhaps you hate going to the dentist because you have to find a car park somewhere. It's a pain in the backside, it's not a nice experience. So think about the experience, the way that you deliver what you do, and that's all part of the value. In fact, I would argue, arguably, that's even more important sometimes than the physical stuff that you do. It's the experience that you give. So we need to think about both those aspects, the tangible stuff, the intangible stuff. How can we give a bigger bundle of stuff? How can we create more value for our clients? The next mistake that we make is we don't give enough value, or it may be that we give enough value, but they can't see the value. So one of the things that we've got to become really, really good at is communicating the value to our clients. We sometimes take it for granted because we know what we do. We know, for example, that when they bring in their carrier bag every year with their records, their invoices, their cash book and so on, we know that that'll be in our office for a month or so, and we'll do a huge amount of work on that. We'll reconcile their VAT returns, we'll reconcile their sales ledger to make sure their sales balances are correct so that they can get paid properly the money they're owed, to make sure the credits are right. We reconcile their bank, we make sure they claim all the expenses they need to do in their account so they can minimise their tax relief. We do all sorts of checks and balances and reconciliations. So we know that we're adding a huge amount of value with just the basic compliance stuff that we do. But do the clients know that? Think about it from their point of view. From their point of view, they bring in a carrier bag, drop it off at reception, and about 3 or 4 weeks later, come in for the meeting, and you give them about 5 or 6 sheets of paper. They don't see the value, they don't see all the stuff that you do. They don't understand what you do and why you do it to make sure their accounts are accurate, to help them. We've never told them. We take it for granted. So what we've got to do as accountants is we've got to become much, much better at explaining what we do, of explaining the benefits, so they can truly see what it is that we're doing for them and the benefit to them. In a little while I'll share with you some communication little ideas that will help you to communicate the value and help you to educate your clients so they can see that value. I keep hearing accountants over the last 3 or 4 years, times are tough, we know that. We're living in difficult economic times. And most accountants say to me, yeah, but our clients are so price sensitive. They're looking for the cheapest possible price. Even in the current economic climate, no client, and certainly not the clients that you want to work with, none of your ideal clients are price sensitive. None of them are price sensitive. They're value sensitive. And there's a big, profound difference between the two. They want value. The price doesn't matter. So if you've got a client, for example, that's at the moment paying, let's say, £750, and they've been talking to an accountant down the road who can do it for £500, you might think, that they're obviously looking for the cheapest accountant, they're obviously price sensitive. But if you can find a way of doing some planning with that client because you spent a bit of extra time on their affairs, thinking about how you can add some value, and you go to that client and say, I've just come up with an idea that might be able to save you £100,000 in tax, would that be of interest to you? Then when you then say the price for doing that could be, let's say, £30,000, the client's going to be thinking, crikey, I could save £100,000. Here's the value to the client, £100,000. The price at 30 is actually relatively small. They're starting to say they're going to be £70,000 better off. The price is irrelevant. The fact that you were charging 750 quid before and they're talking about someone who's going to charge 500 quid, suddenly that's irrelevant because you can now explain and say, look, there's some additional benefit. I can do something here that's going to save you £100,000. The price is now not an issue. They'll happily pay £20,000, £30,000. And I know that because many firms I'm working with are pricing in that sort of way, by pricing based upon the value and getting significantly bigger prices. David Delve, £128,000 for doing a company formation, because he found a way to communicate effectively the value of what he does. Price is not an issue, it's value. The next mistake number 6, is that we don't then link that price to the value. In other words, we might be fantastic at adding more value, at creating a bigger bundle of stuff. And we might learn the skills, the communication skills of explaining that value. But that's not the end of the story. What we've then got to do is find a way of, once we've added massive value to our clients and they understand that, we've got to find a way of capturing that value by charging the right price based on the value, not based on the amount of time we take. That's an old concept. Cost plus pricing is completely irrelevant. We need to be looking at how much value and price accordingly. So how do we do that? Well, sometimes that can be easy, but sometimes it can be challenging. It depends what the value is. Sometimes that's easy to calculate, sometimes that's hard, and every client values things differently. And I'm not saying that value pricing is easy, it's not, it's difficult. But the alternative of going back to the old way of doing things, of timesheets adding up hours, what we've done there effectively by having timesheets and time recording systems is we've relegated pricing to be an administrative function. It's basically a function of such as someone keying in hours, multiplying by some sort of made up number, and that happens to come up with a price. Pricing is one of the 4 P's of marketing. Pricing is part of marketing. The prices that we charge send out a signal into the marketplace about the sort of firm that we are. If you have cheap prices, the conclusion that people will think is, oh, they're a cheap firm of accountants, the quality's not that great. If you're expensive, people will think they're obviously good at what they do. So you need to make a decision from a strategic point of view. Do you want to be seen as being a quality firm or a cheap firm? And your prices will reflect the perceptions people have in the marketplace. So we need to find ways of linking price to the value. And it may be, for example, with some things are easy. So with tax planning, for example, one way of doing it, and I'll say only this is just one way, is if we can save someone some money, some tax, then that's a good approximation for value. So if we can save them £100,000, then you could argue there's £100,000 of value there. Now there's other things as well, because the way that you do it, the experience is all part of the value as well. So it's not, don't just think about the physical stuff and the numbers, but that's certainly a good starting point. If you can save a client £100,000 in tax and demonstrate and show that to them, educate them using your communication skills, your systems, so they can see that, then you can set a price based on that, for example. And many firms that I work with will typically charge 25 to 30% of the tax savings. And I would suggest to you that's what you should be thinking of doing. And even if that's a big £20,000, £30,000 number, don't balk at that. If you're adding £100,000 of the value, saving them tax, there's no reason why you shouldn't charge that sort of price. Now you might say, yeah, but it'll take me 2 hours to do. Time doesn't matter. It takes you 2 hours to do because you've got 10, 20, 30 years of training, experience, knowledge you've built up. It's not taken 1 or 2 hours. It's taken you years to come up with a way of saving a client £100,000. So don't, it comes back to this mistake number one. You've got to be confident about your abilities, confident about the value you add to your clients, and be confident about your prices. So sometimes you can link the price to the value if you can monetize it. If it's tax planning, for example, if it's business improvement, if you can help them to increase their profits from some consulting work you've done, for example, you might be able to put a link on there. But don't forget that value also, there's other elements of value. Like, for example, the customer service things, the speed of delivery. And it may be harder to value price compliance work, but it can be done when you understand the drivers of value and start to become creative. And marketing is a creative thing. Administration process is just simply adding numbers up. Marketing, pricing is creative. You can come up with ways to communicate the value and get far bigger prices. And many AVN firms use tools like, for example, Time's Up, you may have heard, as a tool for getting bigger prices. And the last mistake is we just don't know how to communicate. So what I want to just share with you now, just to finish off, is I want to share with you 5 practical, little-known communication secrets, which individually, these are just little things, but when you do all of these little things, you can completely transform the results that you get from pricing. So the first of those 5, and this is an easy one for accountants, we need to make sure that wherever we can, we quantify the benefit. So if you're doing tax planning, for example, make sure you always calculate what the benefit is, calculate what the tax savings are, quantify that. And if it involves some estimation, fine, estimate things if you have to, but quantify the benefit. Make sure you put a number on that. As accountants, we should be good at that. The reason that David Dell was able to charge £128,000 is because the value is much, much greater, and he was able to use systems, tools, software to demonstrate and show that by doing the quantifications, doing the maths, and working out what the benefit, the tax savings were to the client. So we should quantify the benefit wherever we can. Now sometimes that's not easy to do, sometimes we have to use estimation. And there's a great video on my YouTube channel that you might want to watch about how you would do that. So I haven't got time to go through it now, it's about 15 minutes long. But if, for example, you've got a client that's struggling with getting paid on time, they're struggling with bad debts, they're struggling with profitability, and it's perhaps because they've got some challenges with their bookkeeping system, they're looking for you to sort out their bookkeeping, help them, train them up on getting their sales ledger working, then what you need to do is quantify and work with the client to quantify what's the cost of getting it wrong. What's the cost of the mistakes they're currently making, the inadequacies of their bookkeeping, the cost in terms of the bad debts, the cost of not getting paid because they don't actually know what their sales ledger balances are. Start to help the client quantify what that cost is, and then charge your bookkeeping services, and you're training them to help to do the bookkeeping based on the value, not the number of hours. We can always put some sort of quantification on everything that we do. The second thing which is linked to that is extrapolation. It's a little tip here, but this is really, really effective. Whenever you do something where the benefit's recurring, then there's nothing wrong with extrapolating. The example I often use is in corporations. When you help a client or show a client the benefits of forming a limited company, we all know that they will say they often can save some tax. If we sit down and do some maths and show them that if they're as a sole trader they're paying whatever it is in tax this year, if they were to incorporate and rather than drawing the money out, take it out as a salary, they may save a bit of tax, and if they take it out as a dividend instead, they may save even more tax. And you can quantify the benefit by quantifying, calculating the tax savings. And the tax savings might be, let's say, £5,000 they can save in tax by forming a limited company. But you all know that those tax savings are not just in year one, are they? Because if the profits they're making this year are going to be the same next year and the year after and the year after, and if the tax rates remain broadly the same, and they do, although they change a little bit, the corporation tax rates, the income tax rates don't change a huge amount, so it's a pretty good assumption to say that the rates will be pretty consistent for the next 10, 20, 30 years. So then ask the client, when are they thinking of retiring? If they're thinking of retiring and selling the business, let's say in 10 years' time, then if they can save £5,000 in year one, then doing this piece of planning and setting up a limited company won't just save them £5,000, it'll save them about £5,000 between now and when they sell the business in 10 years' time. That's £50,000, assuming they still make the same level of profits. It could be greater. Tell the client that's what's at stake, potentially £50,000. You can qualify it. I mean, say to the client, and I would say you must tell the client, that's assuming the tax rates are broadly the same and assuming your profits are about the same, but you can potentially save £50,000 over the next 10 years. That's extrapolation. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just a tool to help us to communicate, explain, and get the client to really understand what's really at stake. It's not 1 year's worth of tax savings, it's 10 years worth of tax savings that are at stake. And when you quantify in that way, suddenly £50,000 worth of benefit makes your price seem much, much, much smaller than when you're comparing it to the £5,000. The third little secret is something called the benefit price sandwich. Whenever you communicate your price, you also want to be talking about benefits, all the value that you're giving. And a great little technique to use is where you sandwich the price in between the benefits. So you might, as part of your conversation, before you communicate the price, before you reveal the number, you want to make sure you explain the benefits. Okay, so tell them the value that you'll give, the benefits. And then when you've given the price, what you then do is reveal some more benefits, add 2 or 3 more benefits, because what you want them to be thinking about all the time is the benefits. So the more benefits you can have, both before and after the price, the more the price will start to seem insignificant. The fourth one is to use linking phrases. You've probably heard from a marketing point of view that customers never buy features, they buy benefits. And I said to you that pricing is one of the 4 P's of marketing. Pricing is marketing. So we need to, when we're communicating price, we need to be using all of the marketing skills that we've got. And one of those is turning features into benefits. People don't buy features, they buy benefits. We need to make sure we explain to the client what the benefits are of what we do. The benefits of the accounts, the accounts preparation, the tax return preparation, your tax planning. You've got to communicate benefits. But how do you do that if you're not used to that, if you're not used to communicating benefits? Well, a great way of doing that is using linking phrases. Linking phrases are words like, for example, which means that, or so that. But the way that you would use that is whenever you put in, for example, a proposal letter, a feature of what you do. Let's say, for example, that one of the things you'll do as part of your accounts is do a tax planning review. So if you say, you go through and say, well, this is what we'll do, and we'll do your accounts. As part of doing the accounts, we will also do a tax planning review for you. Nothing wrong with doing that, that's great, but that's a feature. What does that really mean to the client? Well, the client doesn't really care. They don't know what a tax planning review is. What they really care about is paying less tax. So let's make it really crystal clear. Every year we'll carry out a tax planning review, which means that we'll identify ways to make sure that you pay the minimum legal amount of tax. That's the real benefit. In fact, no, that's not the real benefit, because what we can do is we can use multiple linking phrases to drill down to what the ultimate benefit is. Now, the ultimate benefit for clients, what they really want more than anything from accountants, are probably just 2 or 3 things. One of those is they want more cash in their pocket. Okay? They want more cash in their pocket. So why not make that really crystal clear and say something like, one of the things that we'll do is carry out a tax planning review, which means that we'll identify tax planning ideas so that you pay the minimum legal amount of tax, so that's another linking phrase, so that you have more cash in your pocket. That's what they're really buying. That's the benefit to them. We have to explain that using language and techniques, because otherwise they won't see it. It's a bit like if you've ever had a quote, for example, from an electrical contractor. They often put in there, one of the bullet points will be, we're qualified to BS 5750 or whatever. As customers, we haven't got a clue what that means, so we dismiss it. It's just a feature. But if they can use linking phrases and turn that feature into benefits, then as customers we think, that's what it means. Now I really value it, I want that. So we have to be good at turning our features, everything that we do, into a benefit, and linking phrases are a fantastic tool for doing that. And the fifth one, I've kind of hinted at this, the contrast principle is so incredibly powerful. What we want to do all the time is when we're talking about price, we need to sell the price, and we need to do it by contrasting it with the benefits. We want to make the contrast as big as possible. We want to make the benefit so big so that the price seems so incredibly small. Not because we're cutting the price, no, but because we're making the benefit seem so obvious. And things like extrapolation do exactly that. Contrasting £50,000 of the tax savings from incorporating against a price of £2,000 makes the price seem much, much smaller than if you look at 1 year's of the tax savings, £5,000. It's going to cost you £2,000, will save you £5,000. If you say it's going to cost you £2,000 and over 10 years you'll save £50,000, the price seems much, much smaller, and it's using the contrast principle. Thank you for listening to me.